Let me ask you something, and I want you to be honest with yourself when you answer it. When your doctor last told you your cholesterol was high, or borderline, or something to keep an eye on, did you actually understand what that meant? Not the word, not the number, but what was genuinely happening inside your body at that moment, and what it was quietly doing to you while you sat there nodding. Because here is what most men over 45 never get told in that office. LDL cholesterol does not send you a warning. It does not wake you up at 3 in the morning with chest pain. It does not slow you down at the gym or make you feel off at breakfast. What it does is far more unsettling than that. It moves silently. It accumulates slowly. And it builds up inside your arterial walls, month after month, year after year. While you feel completely fine, no more energy, decent sleep, no obvious symptoms, just that one number on your annual panel creeping a little higher every time you look. Now I want you to picture something different. 10 weeks from today, you sit down for a blood test. Your doctor pulls up the results, pauses, and looks at you. What have you been doing? Your LDL is down 25, maybe 30 points. No prescription, no statin, just consistent, deliberate changes to the way you eat and live. That is not a scenario I made up. That is what the clinical evidence shows is possible for most men in your position. And today I'm going to walk you through 9 specific evidence-backed strategies to get there. But before we get into strategy 1, I need to tell you something important. Stay with me to the second half of this video because I am going to name 2 supplements that a very large number of men are currently taking right now, believing they are getting safe, natural cholesterol support. One of them has been found contaminated with a compound that can cause serious kidney damage. The other has been directly linked to liver injury, including cases severe enough to require a transplant. Both are sold in health food stores. Both are marketed as natural alternatives to medication. I will name both, explain exactly why they are dangerous, and tell you what to do instead. So do not go anywhere. Let us start with strategy 1. Strategy 1. You are not cutting the right fat. This is the single biggest mistake I see men make when they decide to take their cholesterol seriously. They cut fat, all of it. Less fat in the diet, lower LDL in the blood. That is the logic they carry around, and honestly, I understand why. For decades, that was the dominant message. The problem is it is only partially true, and it is the wrong part they are acting on. Here is what the science actually says. Not all dietary fat raises LDL. Saturated fat does. Saturated fat found in butter, coconut oil, full-fat dairy, fatty red meat tells your liver to slow down how aggressively it clears LDL from your bloodstream. Specifically, it reduces the number of LDL receptors on your liver cells. Fewer receptors means less LDL gets pulled out of circulation. The result is a higher LDL reading on your next panel. Polyunsaturated fat works in the exact opposite direction. The kind found in salmon, walnuts, and flax seeds actually activates more of those same liver receptors. Your liver clears more LDL. Your numbers come down. A large meta-analysis published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition, drawing from over 60 randomized controlled trials, found that replacing saturated fat with polyunsaturated fat, specifically with polyunsaturated fat rather than carbohydrates, produced the strongest, most consistent LDL reductions. We are talking average drops of 8 to 12% and sometimes more. Monounsaturated fat, olive oil, avocado, almonds, operates through a slightly different mechanism, but the effect is similarly positive. It supports HDL while helping manage LDL at the same time. Think of it as working both sides of the equation simultaneously. Here is what this looks like in practice. Replace butter with extra virgin olive oil for cooking on bread as your default. Add a daily handful of walnuts, around 30 grams. Get fatty fish on your plate 2 to 3 times per week. Sardines and mackerel work just as well as salmon and cost far less. Add avocado regularly. You are not removing fat, you are replacing the type of fat. That shift in thinking matters because men who go low fat often replace those calories with refined carbohydrates. And that does not help your LDL at all. Most patients who make this swap consistently start seeing measurable changes within 6 to 8 weeks. Strategy 2. The morning habit that may be working against you. This one surprises people every single time I bring it up. A few years ago, I had a patient who had made serious dietary changes. Disciplined, committed, doing most things right. But after 3 months, his LDL had barely moved. We went through his entire routine together, and eventually we landed on his morning coffee. 2 large cups of French press every single day without fail. Coffee contains a natural oil called cafestol. It is present in coffee beans, and it has one very specific and well-documented effect. It suppresses the LDL receptors in your liver. Silently, daily, consistently, every single cup. Studies comparing filtered versus unfiltered brewing methods have found that French press, Turkish coffee, espresso, and boiled coffee can raise LDL by up to 15 points compared to paper-filtered methods. In some individuals, particularly those who are slower caffeine metabolizers, the effect is even more pronounced. 4 to 6 cups of French press daily, sustained over several months, and some researchers estimate the cumulative LDL impact can reach 25 points or more. That is not a small rounding error. That is a clinically meaningful number. And the fix is almost frustratingly simple. Use a paper filter. That is the entire intervention. Paper filters trap cafestol before it ever reaches your cup. Drip coffee with a paper filter. Pour over with a paper filter. Both are effectively cafestol free. Your LDL sees no meaningful signal from either method. If you genuinely cannot give up espresso or French press, reduce the frequency. Make it an occasional thing rather than a daily ritual. My patient switched to paper-filtered drip coffee. Everything else stayed the same. 8 weeks later, his LDL was down 9 points. 1 change, 0 cost. That is the kind of leverage most men are walking past every single morning without realizing it. A strategy. 3. The digestive mechanism most men have never heard of. I want to spend some time here because this one tends to genuinely change the way people understand how cholesterol works. Soluble fiber. Most people know they should eat more fiber. Almost none of them understand the specific biological reason why soluble fiber affects LDL. And that mechanism is worth knowing because once you understand it, you stop seeing fiber as a vague health recommendation and start seeing it as a direct tool. Here is how it works. Your liver manufactures bile acids using cholesterol. Those bile acids travel into your gut to help digest fat. Under normal circumstances, roughly 95% of those bile acids get reabsorbed further down the intestinal tract and recycled back to your liver. The loop runs continuously all day. A soluble fiber interrupts that loop. When soluble fiber enters your digestive system, it absorbs water and forms a thick, viscous gel. That gel physically binds to bile acids in your gut. Instead of being reabsorbed, those bile acids get trapped and excreted. Now your liver has a deficit. It needs to manufacture new bile acids to replace what was lost. And to do that, it draws more cholesterol out of your bloodstream. Your circulating LDL drops as a direct result. This is not a fringe theory. The FDA has issued a specific approved health claim for beta-glucan, the soluble fiber found in oats, precisely because the evidence for LDL reduction met their threshold for clinical significance. That is a high bar. Most food-based health claims never get there. Research suggests the effective daily target is 7 to 10 grams of soluble fiber. Below that, the effects are modest. At that level and above, you start seeing reliable LDL reductions of 5 to 10% in most individuals. Practically, start with rolled oats every morning, not instant, rolled, around 3 to 4 grams of soluble fiber per serving. Add 2 tablespoons of chia seeds, roughly 5 grams, stirred into your oatmeal or a glass of water. Lentils and beans at lunch or dinner. Half a cup of cooked lentils adds another 2 to 3 grams and brings solid plant protein alongside it. Apples, pears, and citrus fruits all contribute meaningful amounts and require no preparation. If you find it consistently difficult to hit 7 to 10 grams through food alone, psyllium husk is a well-researched option. 1 teaspoon stirred into water once a day adds around 5 grams. Inexpensive, bland, and the clinical data behind it is robust. Strategy 4. Plant protein is doing more than you think. This connects directly to the fiber conversation, but there is a layer here that goes beyond fiber and fat alone. Multiple clinical trials have found that substituting plant protein, specifically nuts, seeds, and legumes, for animal protein, particularly red meat, produces measurable LDL reductions. Part of that effect is mechanical. When you replace meat with nuts and legumes, you are simultaneously reducing saturated fat and increasing fiber, 2 mechanisms working at once. But research also suggests there is a direct effect from plant proteins themselves on how your liver handles LDL metabolism, separate from both the fat and the fiber. Soy protein has been the most extensively studied, and the findings are reasonably consistent. Even modest substitutions, 30 to 50 grams of plant protein daily replacing the same amount of animal protein, have shown LDL reductions of 4 to 8% in well-controlled trials. This does not mean going vegetarian, not even close. It means that a few times each week, when you might reach for red meat, you choose differently. A handful of almonds and a bowl of black beans, lentil soup instead of beef stew, flax seeds stirred into your morning oats alongside the chia seeds. Small substitutions, consistently applied, that compound over weeks and months. Strategy 5. What exercise is actually doing to your cholesterol? Let me be direct here, because this is important. If you are carrying significant excess body weight, losing even 5 to 10% of your total body weight can produce meaningful improvements in your LDL and your overall lipid profile. That is not a peripheral recommendation. It is foundational. Every other strategy in this video works less effectively if excess weight is part of the picture and is not being addressed alongside these dietary changes. Beyond weight, exercise has a direct and documented effect on cholesterol metabolism. Cardiovascular training, brisk walking, cycling, swimming tends to raise HDL and produces a modest but real reductions in LDL. Resistance training improves insulin sensitivity and reduces triglycerides, both of which have downstream effects on LDL composition and overall cardiovascular risk. Here is something that rarely gets discussed. The type of LDL particle matters, not just the total count on your panel. Small, dense LDL particles are significantly more dangerous than large, buoyant ones. They penetrate arterial walls more easily and are more vulnerable to oxidation. Think of it this way. A small, dense particle is like a sharp piece of gravel grinding through a pipe. A large, buoyant particle is more like a smooth ball that passes through cleanly. Regular exercise shifts the distribution toward larger, safer particles, even when total LDL stays roughly the same. Your doctor may not test for particle size routinely, but it is worth asking about if you want the full picture of your cardiovascular risk. The clinical target is 150 minutes of moderate aerobic activity per week, plus 2 resistance training sessions. If you are not currently active at all, here is your starting point: 20 to 30 minutes of walking per day and 2 basic strength sessions per week using body weight or light weights. That is enough to begin shifting your metabolic environment. Start there. Build from there. Strategy 6. The cholesterol connection your gut has been hiding. This is the one that most consistently surprises people, because almost no one connects their gut health to their cholesterol levels. Your gut microbiome is capable of breaking down bile acids. The same bile acids involved in the cholesterol recycling loop I described in Strategy 3. Certain bacterial strains produce enzymes called bile salt hydrolases. When these bacteria deconjugate bile acids inside the gut, it reduces their reabsorption. Your liver has to pull more cholesterol from the bloodstream to manufacture replacements. Same downstream effect as soluble fiber, but through an entirely different mechanism, which means the two work together and compound each other. Fermented foods introduce and support the bacterial populations responsible for this. Miso, kimchi, sauerkraut, plain kefir, 1 to 2 servings per day, supports the kind of gut environment that quietly contributes to better cholesterol metabolism over time. The research on specific probiotic strains for LDL reduction is still developing. But what is already clear is this: overall gut microbiome diversity correlates with better lipid profiles. And fermented whole foods are the most practical and well-supported way to build that diversity for most people. A single strain supplement capsule is not remotely the same thing. Think of this as building long-term infrastructure. A small bowl of miso with dinner, a tablespoon of kimchi alongside a meal, a cup of plain kefir in the morning, small, consistent, and quietly supporting everything else you are doing. Strategy 7. Stress, sleep, and the hormonal driver nobody talks about. This is the strategy that most online health content glosses over, and I think that is a mistake. Chronic psychological stress triggers the sustained release of cortisol. Cortisol, in prolonged elevated states, signals the liver to increase LDL production. The mechanism is direct. Stress is not a background factor that vaguely influences health. In men over 45 who are under consistent work, financial, or relational pressure, it can be a meaningful driver of elevated LDL. And no amount of dietary change will fully compensate for a cortisol system running at high alert around the clock. Poor sleep compounds this. The research consistently links short sleep duration and poor sleep quality to higher LDL and worse overall lipid profiles. The relationship appears to run through multiple pathways: cortisol regulation, insulin sensitivity, inflammation, and the timing of liver cholesterol metabolism. The practical target is 7 to 9 hours of uninterrupted sleep per night. If you are averaging 5 or 6, that alone may be undermining the progress you are working hard to make through diet and exercise. For stress, the clinical evidence is strongest for consistent moderate aerobic exercise, which you are already adding from strategy 5, and structured mindfulness or breathing practices. Even 10 minutes of deliberate slow breathing daily has documented effects on cortisol regulation over time. These are not soft lifestyle suggestions. They are mechanisms. Known strategy 8, the fact that everyone is still getting wrong. I want to spend a moment here because the misinformation on this particular topic has been persistent for a long time. Eggs. For 3 or 4 decades, eggs were treated as a cardiovascular threat. The reasoning seemed clean. Eggs contain dietary cholesterol. Dietary cholesterol raises blood cholesterol. Therefore, eggs are the problem. Simple, logical, and largely wrong. Your liver is not a passive system. When dietary cholesterol intake increases, your liver compensates by producing less of its own. For most healthy men, the net effect on blood, LDL, from eating 1 egg per day is quite small, considerably smaller than the effect of the saturated fat in the butter that egg was cooked in, or the processed meat sitting next to it on the plate. Think about what typically surrounds an egg at breakfast. Butter in the pan, processed sausage or bacon, white toast spread with more butter. The egg is almost never the cholesterol story. Everything surrounding it usually is. Current evidence supports 1 egg per day as well tolerated for the large majority of healthy individuals without meaningfully raising LDL. The nuance applies to men with familial hypercholesterolemia or type 2 diabetes. In those cases, the response to dietary cholesterol can be more pronounced, and the conversation with your physician genuinely matters. If that describes you, discuss it directly. For everyone else, the egg is not the problem. What is next to it on the plate? That is where your attention belongs. Strategy 9. The compound effect of stacking. This is not a separate intervention, but this is the frame that makes everything else work at a different level. Individual dietary strategies produce modest, often inconsistent results on their own. What produces lasting, meaningful LDL reduction is a coherent pattern where multiple mechanisms operate at the same time. The Mediterranean diet and the DASH diet consistently outperform targeted supplement approaches in long-term trials. Not because any single food in those patterns is miraculous, but because they combine fat quality, fiber load, plant protein, and reduced processed food intake all at once. You are not managing one variable. You are changing the entire environment your liver operates in. Think about what happens when you layer these strategies together. You switch to olive oil. LDL receptors become more active. You add oats and chia seeds every morning. Bile acids stop recycling as efficiently. You add salmon twice a week. Polyunsaturated fat pushes LDL clearance further. You switch from French press to filter coffee. You eliminate a hidden daily driver. You add a handful of walnuts, plant protein and fiber working in parallel. You add kefir and kimchi. Your gut microbiome starts actively supporting cholesterol metabolism. None of these changes alone is dramatic, but together, consistently, over 8 to 12 weeks, that is how men start seeing 20 and 30-point drops that make their doctors ask what they have been doing. The supplement warning. What you need to hear before you buy anything. I told you at the beginning of this video that I was going to name 2 supplements that are causing real harm to men right now. Here they are. The first is red yeast rice. Red yeast rice has become enormously popular in natural health circles. And to be straightforward with you, it does lower LDL. The reason it works is that it contains a compound called monacolin K, which is chemically identical to lovastatin, a prescription statin drug. When you take red yeast rice, you are essentially taking an unregulated statin. Here is the serious problem. The fermentation process used to produce red yeast rice can generate a contaminant called citrinin, a mycotoxin with documented kidney toxicity. Testing of commercial red yeast rice products has repeatedly found citrinin contamination across a significant proportion of what is currently on the market. The contamination levels vary unpredictably from batch to batch and from brand to brand. There is no regulatory oversight ensuring a consistent dose. There is no guaranteed purity standard. You are taking a statin equivalent compound with none of the safety controls that apply to prescription medications. The real irony is this: men turn to red yeast rice precisely because they want to avoid the perceived risks of pharmaceutical statins. But without standardized manufacturing, they are actually taking on more uncertainty, not less. They do not know what dose they are getting. They do not know whether the bottle in their cabinet is contaminated. If your LDL is high enough to genuinely require statin level intervention, have that conversation with your doctor about an actual regulated dosed prescription statin, controlled dose, regulated manufacturing, documented safety profile. That is the more responsible choice, not the less natural one. The second is concentrated green tea extract in capsule form. This one requires a careful distinction because drinking green tea is genuinely beneficial. 3 to 4 cups a day has solid evidence behind it. It carries no meaningful risk for most men. And the polyphenols, particularly EGCG, have shown modest positive effects on LDL in multiple studies. Green tea as a beverage is something I actively recommend. Capsule supplements containing concentrated green tea extract are a completely different matter. There are documented cases of serious liver injury, some requiring liver transplants, associated with high-dose green tea extract supplements. The FDA and the European Food Safety Authority have both flagged this issue specifically. The cases are not common, but they are real, they are documented, and they have been serious enough to prompt formal public warnings from regulatory agencies. The problem appears to be dose concentration. A cup of green tea delivers a certain amount of EGCG, diluted naturally through the brewing process. A capsule delivering the equivalent of 40 or 50 cups can overwhelm the liver's processing capacity in susceptible individuals. The difficulty is that you often cannot identify in advance who those susceptible individuals are. Drink the tea. Enjoy it freely, but be cautious, especially at the higher doses marketed for weight loss and cholesterol support. Natural and safe are not the same thing. That distinction matters enormously when we are talking about organ damage. Here is where I want to leave you. The patients I have seen make the most meaningful and lasting improvements in their LDL numbers were not the ones who did everything perfectly. They were not the ones who never had a burger or skipped a gym session. They were the ones who made the right changes consistently, week after week, month after month, and kept going even when progress felt slow. Cholesterol is not a sprint. It is a reflection of your habits accumulated over time. And your habits over the next 90 days will show up clearly in your next blood panel. Build the pattern. Stack the strategies. Give it time. If this breakdown was useful to you, a like helps more people find evidence-based information when they are searching for answers on cholesterol. Most of what comes up when people search this topic is trying to sell them something. I want this channel to be different from that. And if you want to go deeper on structuring your meals practically around these principles, how to actually build a weekly plan that incorporates the Mediterranean approach without overcomplicating your life, I covered that in detail in another video. Link is in the description. Consistency beats perfection every single time. See you in the next one.